At 4:55 a.m. on January 1st, he searched how long before a body starts to smell. At 4:58 a.m., how to stop a body from decomposing. At 5:20 a.m., he searched how to embalm a body. At 5:47 a.m., 10 ways to dispose of a dead body if you really need to.
Obviously, when you find that, it's damning.
Incriminating search history. It's something we see brought up in nearly every case we cover, but some defendants' searches are more shocking than others.
At 11:34 a.m., dismemberment and the best ways to dispose of a body.
Investigators say these near unbelievable search results were made by Brian Walsh, the Massachusetts man now charged with his wife's murder. 39-year-old Anna Walsh was last seen on January 1st of this year. The same day, Walsh made dozens of incriminating searches on his son's iPad. Days later, on January 4th, she was reported missing by her employers. Investigators eventually recovered blood and a bloody knife in the basement of Walsh's home just south of Boston. Walsh was first arrested for misleading police in the investigation on January 8th, but was charged with his wife's murder 10 days later. During his district court arraignment, investigators publicly revealed his sordid search history.
At 6:25 a.m. on the 1st, how long for someone to be missing to inherit. At 6:34 a.m. on the 1st, can you throw away body parts? At 9:29 a.m., what does formaldehyde do? At 9:34 a.m. on the 1st, how long does DNA last? At 9:59 a.m., can identification be made on partial remains?
Just last week, a grand jury indicted Walsh in his wife's murder, meaning his case now moves from district court to a county superior court. That means he will have to appear for a new arraignment.
Well, one of the things that stood out to me in the Brian Walsh case was the specificity that he was searching for.
Retired FBI agent Bobby Chacon tells Law&Crime Network Walsh's search history will be difficult for his defense to combat.
I mean, so those things are very damning for a defendant. It's very hard for defense to explain that away, particularly when the wife is missing. And so, yeah, I found that to be really unusual. I mean, in my experience, when you do uncover some of that, it's never that specific. It's usually general. And in that case, in the Brian Walsh case, it was very, very specific to the missing person in that case, which is his wife. And so I thought when I read about those searches and how specific they were, I said, wow, this is really a really great piece of evidence for the prosecution.
What's more, Walsh's search history is corroborated with video of him stocking up on cleaning supplies one day after his wife was last seen.
On January 2nd, following those, the defendant was seen on surveillance at the Home Depot in Rockland. In checking the surveillance, the defendant is observed on a security camera pushing a cart. Items included cleaning products, mops, brushes, tape, towel, a tie-back suit with boot covers, buckets, goggles, baking soda, a hatchet. He had a face mask and rubber gloves on at the time he was pushing the cart in Home Depot.
In the Walsh case, so you have the search history and then you match it up. So suppose you have, based on what he's searching, and then you have, say, video from Home Depot where he's actually purchasing things that match up to the things that he was searching. How to dismember a body, you're going to need a saw, you're going to need this and that. And so you have him in Home Depot days right in the time frame that the wife goes missing, purchasing those things, and then you find blood in the basement or a saw blade in the basement with blood on it. It all matches up, and that's beautiful corroboration. I mean, it paints a great picture, right, for a jury.
Chacon says it's that match, the pairing of physical evidence and an incriminating search history, that creates a win for prosecutors.
I mean, I don't know how a defense team kind of explains all of that away when one thing matches up to another. And that's, for an investigator, that's the sweet spot. That's the home run. When your physical evidence at the crime scene corroborates the search history on the person's computer.
But Brian Walsh isn't the only defendant with a questionable search history. Just last month, 45-year-old James Craig was charged with the murder of his wife, Angela. On March 15th, Angela had a seizure and was put on life support at a hospital in Aurora, Colorado. She was later declared brain dead. According to an affidavit, before his wife died, Craig looked up online information about multiple poisons, how they work to kill someone, and whether they can be detected. Officials say Craig, a dentist, ordered potassium cyanide even though his office did not need it. He's now accused of poisoning his wife's protein shakes with that and arsenic. Investigators say Craig planned to start a new life with an orthodontist who he was having an affair with.
Well, when investigators are looking into any case nowadays, a digital footprint becomes very important. So it's very important to look at a lot of different things that a suspect, or even somebody that may be a suspect, a person of interest, is doing online. Are they looking for places to go, to escape? Are they looking for ways to commit a crime, ways to obtain things to commit the crime, ways to hide their crime? So the digital footprint becomes very, very important.
Jacone says checking into a suspect's internet searches is one of the first thing investigators do now, because what he calls a digital footprint leaves behind so much information.
Part of that digital footprint is what they're searching, particularly for cases where you think your suspect might not be the most experienced criminal. And this happens in a lot of cases where, you know, husbands are thought of maybe suspected of harming their wives or something like that, where this person is not a master criminal, not haven't done this before. So they don't know how to do it. So they have to search online. I mean, you know, in the old days, they might have gone to a library or something like that and looked up arsenic or, you know, poisoning. But now we are so used to having all this information at our fingertips via our smartphones or our laptops or our computers. And so the natural tendency is to just hop online.
Experts say oftentimes criminals have a false sense of security in their internet searches.
We all feel a certain anonymity when they're operating online that may or may not be true. And that's a real boon for investigators because it can yield a lot of information. It can yield information on the mechanics of how a crime was carried out. It can yield motivation on why the crime was carried out. So investigators automatically now dive deep into a person's online presence, and that includes a lot of times, or almost all the time, includes their search history.
And those unsavory search histories are commonly showcased when a case heads to trial.
But what was searched either in Maps or Google searched, could you go through that, give us the time, and then just walk us through what was searched that day? It's on July 8th, 2021.
So July 8th, 2021, 9:44:30 a.m., body found, Wisconsin. 9:44:41.
In 2021, Chandler Halderson was convicted for the murders of his parents, Bart and Krista Halderson. When his case went to trial, prosecutors pointed to some interesting searches Halderson made even before his parents' bodies were recovered.
9:44:41. Women's body found in Wisconsin. 9:44:50. Wisconsin dismembered body found. 9:45:25. Dead body found in Wisconsin. 9:45:40. Body found in Milwaukee River, 2021.
Wisconsin prosecutors used Halderson's search history as a piece of their case, alleging he searched incriminating keywords about dismembered bodies before it had been made public that his parents were dismembered. They argued Halderson knew his parents were dismembered because he's the one who killed them. That, paired with other physical evidence, led to his conviction.
Search history is really important because it can tell us what's in the mind of the person, right? And not only motivations, but it often can lead to other evidence. Now, of course, this is always corroborated by other evidence, by physical evidence or forensic evidence at a crime scene.
But what happens if investigators lack any physical evidence?
If you only have a person's search history, in other words, it's not corroborated by a physical piece of evidence you found at the crime scene or some kind of forensics that yielded some kind of lab result that can match up to the crime. If you only have the person's search history and maybe the body's never been found and blood hasn't been found at the house or whatever, that's going to be a call that a prosecutor would make as to whether they're going to be comfortable enough. Because, you know, as an investigator, I always work hand in hand with a prosecutor. They're the ones that have to stand up before a judge and jury and make the case.
In that case, Jacone says prosecutors would have to weigh their options.
But when it gets into the courtroom, they're the ones on their feet. They're the ones who are standing in front of a jury. They're the ones that have to be comfortable with having that amount of evidence. And so normally they like corroboration. You always like corroboration, which is an independent piece of evidence or two that kind of go together and match each other and bolster the legitimacy of it. I guess, you know, it depends on the laws in the state. Each state has different laws with respect to this, but it would depend on the level of prosecutorial comfort in going forward with just someone's search history. It's like when a prosecutor has to make the decision on going forth without the body. Person's missing, you know, wife is missing. A husband can always say, well, she had an affair 2 years ago. Maybe she ran off with her old boyfriend. A defense is going to make those kind of arguments. And if you only have a search history, and that's the only event, it just leaves the defense more ammunition to attack the prosecution's case.
While search history could lead investigators to find a suspect, motive, or even manner of death, it still needs to be considered within context.
Yourself as a reporter probably have a search history that would pique the interest of investigators because you're working on a story and you're searching dismembered bodies or something like that. That's pretty explainable. And so you have to look at it in context. We look at these search histories in context. If a reporter is doing a story on serial killers, they're probably going to have a search history that in somewhat mimics or mirrors what a serial killer might look up or things like that. So you have to take these things in context. And if the person is not a reporter or not a journalist or not an author, and they're not researching these things, you know, why are they looking up, you know, how to dismember a 125-pound body? And so you take this in context. And so it's not, you know, it's not the government swooping down on everybody that's searching these things. It's in context of this person's wife just disappeared, and now they have a search history that indicates they may be looking at how to dispose of a body. That's the contextual framework that an investigator would be very interested in.
So why would a criminal search something so blatantly incriminating? Chacon says it's likely a matter of convenience.
If you compare, say, someone going into a library and looking up, you know, poisoning in a book and consulting, texts on poisoning and stuff, and then leaving the library, you don't have to check in or whatever. Imagine then the same person nowadays doing that search on their computer. It would be much, much harder to find the fact that they went into that library and did that in those books. Maybe you know, if they used a library way far away from their home, you wouldn't even know to go there and look for video of the person entering. And even if you had video of them walking into a library, you won't have video of which books they consulted and looked at. So I think that nowadays, I think it does yield greater results for law enforcement being able to search that stuff.
Chacon believes law enforcement's ability to track a suspect's digital history has led to more arrests as more people use their phones for research.
It's getting more and more common, I think, among people that haven't committed crimes. You know, and there are tools out there and people know about them that they say they think they can surf anonymously. They go to a private web browser or stuff like that. But, you know, I learned a long time ago, it's very difficult to cover up your digital footprint if somebody like me, and I'm not a cyber guy, but I am, you know, I used to task, you know, experts in the field with helping me out and looking at people's digital footprints, and they are very adept at finding things even when other people delete them or they think they're in private mode or things like that. So while the encryption always gets better and better for people's privacy, so too does the ability of law enforcement to employ experts who can uncover and get through those encryption things and find that stuff. Oftentimes, though, it depends on the age of the defendant and how adept they're going to be at hiding their digital footprint. But, you know, it becomes kind of a cat and mouse game between the defendant and our experts, our, you know, hackers and our experts that can get in there and find, you know, their digital trail.
For Chacon, investigating a suspect's search history has become the cornerstone of a good investigation.
And this has become the new battleground, you know, where, you know, it used to be a hound dog and how good that dog was running through the woods. Well, now we have our hound dogs, we have our cyber experts that person like me brings in on a case. I'm not the expert, but I bring in that hound dog and I let him loose on that computer, and then he kind of tracks his way through. And so it becomes kind of a cat and mouse game. But, fortunately for us, most of the people who are doing these searches are not skilled in cyber crimes. The cyber criminals are much better at doing this. But a husband, say, that kills his wife or researches killing his wife is not the master cyber criminal. And really, he doesn't know how to hide that digital footprint because it's very difficult. And our experts are usually able to recover it pretty quickly.
And like in the case of Brian Walsh, incriminating search histories can lead to a suspect's arrest.
It's usually a husband who's killed a wife or vice versa, or, someone that's now committing a crime possibly for the first time and doesn't know how to do it and is kind of going through the process of, if I dismember this body, what do I do with the parts and things like that. And so, obviously when you find that, it's damning if you find it on, say, for example, on the computer of a husband whose wife is missing, because that really, amps up that person of interest, to possibly a suspect and then ultimately, hopefully, a defendant.
As for Brian Walsh, he's due back in court on May 9th for a probable cause hearing. Reporting for Law&Crime Network, I'm Sierra Gillespie.